Blasphemous Blade is widely regarded to be one of the best weapons in Elden Ring. So in this video, we're going to grab it as early as possible and see how it stacks up in my search for the best weapons in the lands between. It's been a while since I've used this sword, and since my last playthrough with it, it got nerfed before the DLC released, then got an indirect buff from a new DLC talisman which boosts the damage of its Ash of War. So when I started this run, I went into it genuinely not knowing how good this would be. If you want an easy start, you can follow my standard setup route, but if you want to relive your first playthrough again, don't do it just yet, and go and have a scrap with the Noob Killer 3000 straight away. To get Blasphemous early, the only thing that stands in our way is Godskin Noble, and the Golden Halberd fits our stat needs perfectly. Then follow my setup guide if you haven't already, and go to Lenna's Rise to cheese the cavalry and Fort Fareth to kill Grail for some early runes. Then as usual, we need a few bits. Ride south from the Third Church of Marika for the Spike Crack Tear and the Axe Talisman. Then drop down the cliffs from the Church of Pilgrimage in Weeping for the Faith Tier. Up to Mount Gelmir for Golden Vow, and as you're running away from Anastasia, run up the ladder and grab the Somber Six on the edge of the cliff. Getting a good night's sleep is very important, and some nights, just as my head hits the pillow, my brain goes, "Oh, hi there, here's all the stuff that happened today. Sleep well." Happily though, I've recently discovered a solution in this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep reached out to me a couple of months back and sent me over one of their Bluetooth sound masks. As someone who's never tried a sleep mask before, I was pretty skeptical, but I've been using it every night since. Although it's designed and marketed for side sleepers, I found it very comfortable, and I tend to sleep like I'm trying to dodge waterfowl. Manta Sleep masks achieve 100% blackout with zero eye pressure, and thanks to the adjustable speakers built into the sound mask, you can listen to your favourite audiobook, podcast or playlist without disturbing your partner. Use code FISHY at the checkout to get 10% off your basket. Or in this weekend's Black Friday sale, you can save up to 30% in the Manta Sleep store. So if you want the perfect sleep without having to gather St. Trina's lilies, check out the Black Friday sale by clicking on the link in the description. Thank you Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. For our next stop on the build, we're riding southeast from the Dectus Lift to grab the Howl of Shabriri. Kill Banal at the War Master's Shack before heading to Volcano Manor to unlock Assassin's Gambit in the shop. Now for Noble. Chuck a sleep pot between the first two pillars, then run in and spam charges for a completely safe fight. Then remember that you forgot the Golden Scarab and head to the abandoned cave in Caelid to get it. A chargy and an R1 with the halberd will stunlock the Clean Rot Knights. Now for Rykard, and I don't think I've fought Rykard since the DLC released, but I always used to first try him, so this should be fine. that's gone fucking well. Okay, so if you suck at Rykard, this might take a few tries, but it's not awful. Lance in the right hand, Serpent Hunter in the left, and spam crouching pokes for great damage and posture damage. If you use this strat, you'll only need to dodge a couple of attacks in the entire fight. If you're particularly worried about the Rykard fight, you could level up the Serpent Hunter to +4 before heading in. Ride to the Walking Mausoleum to dupe the Remembrance, then back to the Round Table to grab our weapon. Ride to the alley north of the Ionian Swamp for the Somber 5. Then to Iji to buy the remaining Sombers and level up Blasphemous Blade to +9. Ride to the Seathwater Terminus and into Fort Lyde for the Fire Scorpion Charm. Then to the Northwest Caelid Avatar for the Flame Shrouding tier. So there's two schools of thought when it comes to Blasphemous Blade builds. The standard moveset of the sword scales better with strength, but the Ash of War scales off faith. So you can either level strength for a decent but not amazing greatsword, or you can level faith for an Ash of War build capable of some of the best damage in the game. The latter option is the more interesting one in my opinion, so that's what we're doing. If I'd had a little more mind for Radahn, Blasphemous would be the only other weapon in this series to do the same damage as the Wing of Astal. For our second talisman, head to the Lux Ruins to kill the Demi-Human Queen for the Ritual Sword. Then to Stormvale for Margit and Godric. And welcome to this week's episode of When Will He Remember to Use the Great Rune on this run? Predictions in the comments. For Draconic, 3 weapon arts into a Chargy and you're done. Now, because there isn't a 4th talisman that will meaningfully boost our damage until later in the game, head up to the Colosseum to grab the Ritual Shield. For Godfrey, while R1s are as always the safest bet, if you can find a gap for the weapon art, it does some serious damage. For Morgott, although there's no chance of a stagger, it's still a very quick fight. Now back to Caelid for the other avatar, for the Stone Barb tier. The Stone Barb tier is a bit of a funny one. Typically it's something that I add to a build in the late game when my damage is pretty much maxed out for some extra bullying. However, with Blasphemous, especially against 80 poise enemies, I feel like it's an essential part of the build, allowing you to stagger these enemies in 3 takers rather than 4. I wouldn't bother using it on enemies with more posture though, as a lot of bosses are still going to take 5 takers to stagger, and to be honest, if you're hitting a boss with 5 takers in quick succession, they're probably dead anyway. So Blasphemous Blade's number 1 weakness on a Faith build is Mohg. So on a base game run you'd usually leave him until last. However, because of that new talisman in the DLC, and the fact that I knew I could absolutely breeze the rest of the base game anyway, I decided to head towards him at this point. With Mohg's fire resistance, a very slow Taker's Flame cast will do less damage than a charged R2. So Strength Physic, the Axe Talisman and the Spike Crack tier are the way forward here. Considering I've been fighting Mohg as the 2nd or 3rd boss for most of this series, the fact that this was one of the longest scraps I've had with him so far demonstrates the disadvantage of Blasphemous for this fight. When you get to the DLC, as you're following my DLC setup, stop by the shack below the Fort of Reprimand for the Talisman of the Dread, which boosts Taker's Flame by 15%. To maximise our damage and complete our build, back to the base game for Fire Giant, which was a pain point for me, but won't be for anyone actually making this build. In this series, I'm trying to focus on talking about and ranking the weapons as they are, ignoring other options that are available to the builds that use them. When I was originally coming up with the ranking criteria, one of the categories focused on what else you could use if you built around a specific weapon, as the Wing of Astal and Blasphemous builds also give you access to every spell and incantation in the game respectively. This never made it through to the final criteria though, as seriously good weapons like Rakshasas or the Giant Crusher lose points for being pure melee, and weapons like the Cypher Parter get incredible scores because Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike exists. In reality though, we have 50 faith in the LBRTY seal, so anyone doing this build would grab Pest Threads and kill the big man in 10 seconds. For me though, this was quite a long fight. speak to our main man in Radahn's arena, then up to Mount Gelmir to speak to him again. Do a little sparring with him on the Farum rooftops. Holy shit. No, Alex, no! Oh, this is gonna be rough. Classic. Okay, alright, we're fine. Then take the shard he hands you while he tells you he's off clothes shopping with Jaren. At this point, I headed back to the DLC. I would probably recommend doing the whole of the base game before doing the DLC. But as I've monstered the late game with Blasphemous before and wanted to follow a similar route to my Wing of Astal run for comparison, I decided to do it now. Now, very generally, while you can happily spam takers in the base game, in the DLC you want to be a little more selective about where you use it. So take advantage of the really good greatsword moveset to build posture, and then when you get the opportunity, takers will do some crazy damage. Now down into the fissure for Putrescent Knight, and despite him not being particularly weak to fire, this fight really surprised me. Back to the Shadowkeep and start making your way down to the woods for Midra, killing the hippos on the way for more fragments. Blasphemous Blade is one of the best weapons in the game for jewelry, as you can hit jewelry and the ads with a single taker's cast. For Midra, as long as you have the Stone Barb tier, this weapon is a lot better than you might think. Without Stone Barb, this is the worst weapon in the series so far for Midra by a country mile, due to how slow the taker's casts are and how little posture damage they do. For the Fire Weak Romina, this thing is seriously good. I wanted to do at least one fight on the run where I didn't constantly spam the Ash of War, to show you what the rest of the moveset is like on a difficult boss. With the Wing of Astal, you can spam Nebula and delete everything. But the second that you switch to the other attacks, you absolutely fall in love with the charged R2. In fact, I'm still very tempted to do a no Nebula Wing of Astal run, just to show you how good the charged R2s of that weapon are on an int build. With Blasphemous on a Faith build though, you've lost pretty much your entire build the second that you stop spamming Takers. So I think there is quite a good argument for Strength Faith builds, especially in the DLC where you may find yourself using more and more of the standard moveset. In the balancing before the DLC released, they nerfed the Taker's Ash of War a bit, as it used to knock down humanoid enemies instead of just hit stunning them. The hit stun, however, is still good enough to chain attacks, so again, this is one of the best weapons in the game for the ladder fight. For the best boss in Enir Ilum, Takers is really solid. You can squeeze it into most of the openings if you get your timings locked in, and the damage is really good. Like Rosus, the animation will also duck under a few attacks if you're lucky. For Bale, set up a stagger with the standard moveset and you can get a fight that's almost as good as Bloodfiend's arm, which is as high as praise gets. Now back to the base game for Malekith. And from here on in, I ditched Stone Barb, as I had a feeling that the low posture damage might actually put staggers where I want them for some of the later fights. Hit Godfrey straight out of the cutscene to assert dominance, then use the standard moveset to build posture. It probably won't shock you how good this is for Radagon. While it doesn't do enough posture damage to stagger him and skip phase 2 entirely, 3 takers is all you really need. For both the Elden Beast and Placidusax fights, Blasphemous is strong, but unremarkable. Its selling point for both is the range damage you can get on takers, which is very useful when a boss opens up the distance. So how good is Blasphemous Blade in 2025? Something that's important to mention before we get to the scores is the blood-sucking tier. I made a decision early in this series to avoid using this tier, as if I give one weapon a 20% buff, it will be unfair on everything else. But because of Taker's Flame healing you, and therefore counteracting the tier's main downside, Blasphemous is the perfect weapon for the blood-sucking tier, which would drastically increase the damage. For single output, it delivers some of the biggest hits in this series so far, beating everything apart from an RKR Giant Crusher on a lot of the bosses. So a 9-5 is what I was thinking initially. However, I just can't ignore the fact that for certain bosses it was embarrassed by an Uchi, delivering some of the smallest single hit damage so far. I'm going to be generous and give it a 9 in single hit output. All the same stuff is true for DPS. For bullyability, I'm giving it a 6. The woeful stagger potential of Taker's Flame would see a much lower score, but with Stone Barb for the low posture bosses, the Greatsword moveset, and the damage allowing you to delete health bars on certain bosses brings that score back up. Adaptability, it gets a 7. Like Dragonmaw, this score is a balancing act of it being terrible in certain fights and among the best in the game for others. I actually thought this sword was going to be another weapon that tops a category so confidently that I'd have to rescore everything else, and ease of use was the category I saw this happening in. For a casual playthrough, where you're clearing out legacy dungeons and fighting multiple enemies all the time, the ranged AoE and healing ability of Taker's Flame puts this thing in a league of its own. However, again, I just can't ignore the fact that for certain fights, it's bad. Moog, Fire Giant and Midra without Stone Barb were certainly the toughest fights I've done in this entire series. And for me, that's fine, but someone who doesn't know the game well would struggle on those fights in a way that they wouldn't with any other weapon on this list. So I'm giving it a 9, a compromise between the 12 I would have given it generally and the 6 I'd give it for certain fights on a run. And that's it, another weapon on the list. If you try this build, please let me know how you get on in the comments section. And do keep telling me which weapon or build you'd like to see next. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon.